We've, finished Esther, and so now it's time to review just a little bit, go over some stuff. We didn't quite get to, I think, chapter 10, right, when we were doing it, but that's only about like 3 verses, so we can go over that today really, really quickly. But today, more than anything, I really just kind of wanted to maybe talk about some maybe practical applications of Esther, right? That's what David and I kind of thought would be good to do today. So just, kind of review of the whole book in general, how it applies to our lives. We talked a little bit last week about how Esther is one of the books where God is not, specifically mentioned, in the book, but we still see God there, especially through his providence, his faithfulness to his people, and those kinds of things. So that's why I wanted to kind of talk about it, go over today. So I'll need a lot of help today because I don't, have a bunch of material to read or cover, but I thought, if y'all have some ideas, when I throw out some questions, let's see what y'all think. And I picked some Bible verses here and there that I thought could help illustrate our points too, okay? So I might need some help looking those up as well. So here we go. Let's see how we can do this morning, okay? So let's see if I can make everything work. It's always fun when you can't get things to work the way that you want it to work. But that's okay. One way or the other, we're going to get done. There we go. All right. So remember last week, just to remember everything that was kind of going on, the edicts had gone out, right? And the Jews were supposed to be destroyed. Do you remember on which day?
13th.
There you go. The 13th of Adar, right? But when the tables get turned on Haman, right, and the new edict has to go out to reverse the king's original decision, now the 13th turns into a day of feasting and rejoicing because the new edict, the new command says the Jews are able to protect themselves on the 13th, and that becomes kind of like a day of reckoning, right? Where the Jews are going to destroy their enemies on that day. Don't forget, all of Haman's power and fortune get distributed to Esther and Mordecai, right? So then we have the battle, right? The Battle of Susa that happens on the 13th and the 14th, 800 people killed. And then all throughout the land, we had 75,000 people killed. And those were the enemies of the Jews, people that were looking to destroy them, come after them, and that kind of stuff. Okay. And so then this is what establishes Purim, right? And remember, Purim is the celebration. Happens roughly like 50 days after Passover, right? When the Jews celebrate, being saved from annihilation, right, from this decree that Esther helped save them from, all right? So that's where we ended last week, and we almost had number 10. Here's number 10, really, really quickly, and it starts off with the greatness of Mordecai. And I think I was teasing last class. I thought it was just slightly ironic that the end of Esther talks about the greatness of Mordecai when it's kind of like, well, it's called Esther, it's not called Mordecai, right? But what do we hear about Mordecai in 10? If you're there, you might want to take a quick peek at it, right? It's a little bit historical, I felt like. If I can get my Wi-Fi to work here, I can actually look at 10. So King Xerxes imposed tribute throughout the empire to its distant shores, and all his acts of power and might, together with a full account of the greatness of Mordecai, whom the king had promoted, are they not written in the book of annals of the kings of Media and Persia? So again, almost a kind of rhetorical question like, this stuff is true, don't you know it's true? Because it's written in these history records as well. Mordecai the Jew was second in rank to King Xerxes, preeminent among the Jews and held in high esteem by many fellow Jews because he worked for the good of his people and spoke up for the welfare of all the Jews, right? So we get nothing about Esther in the last chapter of Esther, right? Which again is the irony of ironies. But, again, talking about Mordecai and, his character and what he has done. Did Esther work for the good of people and spoke up for the welfare of all Jews? Certainly, right? I mean, you could replace Esther in that sentence just as easily as Mordecai, right? So again, I thought that was interesting. And, that is something I just wanted to cover at the end. What did you see in Esther's character, right, that makes her great, right, that makes her brave, right? What did you think about her as a person, right, that this book is named for her, right? What do you see there?
Kind of off that topic, but on that topic.
That's okay. We can go off and back on.
Weave through this. I have a dear friend who will happily say, we don't need to look at the Old Testament.
He says we don't need to
don't need to look
okay,
at the Old
gotcha.
Testament.
Okay.
But just look at Esther, the lessons we get from Ruth and Esther. It's so practical for us today. There's no doubt in my mind it's put in there for a purpose.
Yeah.
us to go back and look, see how they did. Just know it today, this is what it is.
Yeah, I agree. And that's supposed to be what we're talking about today. So how is it relevant? How is Esther great? What does she show us, right? Where she is, I think, just as awesome, if not more awesome than Mordecai.
Well, she waited on God. Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
She waited on God's timing
Okay.
for things, and you know, she said, "You guys fast, and we'll see what God wants me to do."
Yes.
And she really had God in her forefront before
Okay.
she did anything.
Okay. Awesome. Just thought.
I guess I could just piggyback on what she just said, is that she had God in the forefront, and therefore she wasn't afraid for herself.
Yeah.
She was looking out for the good of other people.
Yeah.
And that's sometimes how we get wrapped up in what we want to do and what we get satisfaction from. And we forget that there are others out there who may not share that same sentiment, or they may not be in a predicament to be in the position that we are in. So, and I heard something once, when the pandemic came out, the person said, Christians more than any body of people should be concerned about the other person. And I thought that was a great statement for the character of being a Christian.
Yeah, I think that's beautifully said for both of y'all. And that's why you're exactly right. Christians, we are called on to look for others over ourselves, right? And Esther does that, right? I mean, she is not in the, I guess, position of power or, totally esteemed position, when she has to go approach the king at first, I don't feel like. I mean, she's been chosen, and I know she's gone to beauty treatments for the year and all that kind of stuff. But still, the law is out there. If the king doesn't want to see you, then, and we know what happened to Vashti. And she makes the statement, before she says she's going to fast and, get ready. If I perish, I perish, right? She knows the consequences. She knows the risk, if you will. But she is willing to go out there, just like y'all said, God's in her mind, I'm doing this for other people. And this is something I have a chance to do. I've been put in a position where I can make a difference. There are plenty of times in our lives where, we have no say-so in what's going to happen in certain things, right? We can do nothing. It's not in our realm of control at all. But when things fall in our realm of control, if we do nothing, right? I mean, that's just as bad as sitting there and complaining about it, right? I mean, you're not taking advantage of a chance of where God has put you, right? Maybe you've been put there for such a time as this, right? Which I think is the amazing part to me about Esther in this book, and like Dale was saying, and why it's important in the Old Testament. That's just my idea, okay? So let's just go through a couple.
She also had respect for the law of the land.
Okay.
Because she didn't just go right in there. She respected the king and that. So that's a good character.
Yes.
Of her that she did that.
Yeah, I mean, we can complain about things all we want to, right? But if we just want to be anarchists and try and, that's not going to fix things, right? We kind of have to work sometimes within the system. And we're told to do that too, right? Giving to Caesar what is Caesar, right? And what it's God's, right? And we're supposed to, follow him. And the leaders have been put into a position by God, right? I mean, we're told that in the Bible too. Whether we like them, don't like them, I mean, they're there for a reason. Sometimes they may be there to teach us a lesson, right? And sometimes they're there so we can pray for them and hope they can get better, right? So let's go through it a little bit and start talking about some just points I thought, and I was just brainstorming, thinking about these things. This is just me. So if y'all have another point you want to bring up, then you're more than welcome to. Oh, please, I'm ready. Let's go.
You said, why isn't it complimenting Esther down here in number 10, but that's what they did with women. They threw them in the back seat and didn't want to see them or talk to them. And she even had to ask permission to see her husband.
Yes.
Really? I'm like, come on now. I was like, oh, are you kidding me?
Bill, that doesn't sound like that work in your house. Not mine either.
I know my place.
There you go. That's right.
I'm still learning now.
Hey, you're a lot smarter than I am.
But besides being brave and courageous, she was humble enough to do everything that a woman had to do back then. And God used her, and I'm glad that's why He put this book in here to show us, you
Yes.
know, what a woman can do.
Yes.
So.
I love that. I'm glad that's said. And that, you know, and sometimes I always tell students when we're studying in class, I usually talk about Queen Elizabeth as my example. I mean, she's a perfect example, and I'm doing the Queen Elizabeth I, right, not the second, but she was the most powerful woman in the world at a time when women were not supposed to have any power at all, right? You know, the sun never set on the British Empire, you know, all that kind of stuff, defeating the Spanish Armada, you know, all the amazing accomplishments that she had, and she was not going to wed. She said, I'm wedded to my country, because she knew the second she wed, a man would come in there and just take it over and just do whatever he wanted to do, right? And Esther is in a position, right, way before Queen Elizabeth, right, when women are not supposed to have power, yet she finds a way to get influence, right, to save her people, and she is rewarded with all of Haman's stuff, right? You know, and I believe if you look at 9, she has a considerable amount of power at the end too, because don't forget that it's the edict that Queen Esther wrote and approved of that established Purim, right? Not Mordecai. Now, you know, maybe if Mordecai's a scribe and he had a hand in that and sending that out, okay, whatever. But the Bible tells us that it's Queen Esther. So look at the last sentence in 9. That's exactly what it says, which I thought was really cool, okay? All right, excellent point. Really cool. All right, so let's talk about leadership. All right, that was the first thing that popped out to me, right? You know, obviously leadership's an issue in Esther because who gets into a leadership role that it's not so great? Haman, right? You know, I mean, we get that. You know, we sometimes have to be concerned about those in leadership roles. And again, I'm not trying to make this political or anything like that at all, but it's just a fact, right? And those are the people who are out there, and those are the ones that we have to worry about. So those are the last 2 presidents. Feel about them however you want to feel about them, but it doesn't change the fact that they're the last 2 guys in control, right? Okay? You know, how much does that change our lives? How much does it influence? You know, I think it's a matter sometimes of personal opinion. But let's look at a couple of verses from the Bible about this a little bit, right? And you tell me what you think about this one first, right? So if someone could look up Matthew, someone can look up Luke, and someone can look up John. Let's go to those really quickly. Once you get there, if you just want to start reading, that's fine.
I have Matthew. So,
Okay, let's go.
Not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be first must be your slave. Just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many.
Okay, so leaders are obviously supposed to what? Are they supposed to have the ego? No, they're told to be servants, right? I mean, they're here to work for the betterment of others, not for the betterment of themselves. Okay, right? What else? What about Luke?
I got it.
Okay?
But the one who does not know and does things deserving punishment will be beaten with few blows. From everyone who has been given much, much will be demanded. And from the one who has been entrusted with much, much more will be asked.
So when we have influence in the world, right, and we are given responsibility, it doesn't matter if we're a Sunday school teacher, it doesn't matter if we're a coach, it doesn't matter if we're, you know, a father, right? It doesn't matter if we become, you know, president of a company, a CEO, a boss, or whatever. We're put into a position where we have a lot we have to control, right? I'm sure you guys that were in the military, right? I mean, you know, you get a command, you know, you get people underneath you, and now you're responsible for them. You've been entrusted with the role, and what are you going to do with it? You know, in any business, in any company, right? I'm sure you work up to a point where, you know, now you have some influence, and you know, you have to talk to people about what has to be done, and you know, it can be comfortable sometimes, and it can be uncomfortable, but you know, you have a lot more responsibility in front of you, right? Okay, and does anyone have John?
I got it. Because you call me the teacher and the Lord, and you are right to do it, so, well, that is what I am.
Okay. Jesus, the ultimate teacher, right? And Jesus, the one who we should look after in all things. Okay, so what do you think about that? How or why should we be concerned about those who are in leadership roles? Doesn't matter if the president, mayor, right? Your Sunday school teacher, right? I mean, you know, should you be concerned about those people? And I don't mean like worried like, oh my gosh, they're coming to take all my money all the time. That's not what I mean, right? But should you be worried about them?
No, you shouldn't be.
Why?
Because a lot of times we elect somebody or put somebody in position, and they don't do as they said they would do, you're in trouble.
Sure, there's lots of empty campaign promises, right? For sure, okay, right? What about, someone else like a, I don't know, football coach? Right? He resigned like what, 3 or 4 days ago, right? Same thing. Should you worry about the teachers in your child's school? And this isn't me knocking Coach LaPratt, because I've told people, when I heard about it, he's one of the best people I've ever met, right? I think he's outstanding, right? And I've known him for a while. I mean, I remember meeting him back when I was a high school kid at a wrestling tournament at Somerville, right? And he was a great guy then, right? So I'm not knocking him at all, but, are these guys that we need to pray about, to worry about, be concerned about? Why are you worried about who's your child's teacher, right? Who your grandson's teacher maybe?
Some of them because you're worried about what they're teaching.
Sure, right? You're worried about what they're teaching, right?
Role models also,
Okay, what's that?
they're role models.
They're role models, right? Those are people your kids are going to look up to, right? One way or the other. Your kid's teacher is going to spend a lot of time with them. A lot. Their
Not
coach.
infallible.
That's right. And they're not infallible.
Nobody.
None of us are,
No.
right? And that's what I mean. We should be worried about them, right? We're told to pray for leaders, correct? We worry about people that we like and that we love. If they make a mistake, they're going to trip up, right? And, we want them to be okay, right? Even, the ones we like or don't like or don't even care about, right? You still probably need to pray for them because they're going to have some influence over your life in some way, shape, or form, right? They're put there for a reason, right? By God. So, again, leadership is a big deal, right? Do you think that they have power over your lives every day? Yeah, yes and no, right? I think is a fair answer, right? Doesn't matter who's president, tomorrow I've got to wake up and go to work, right? That's not going to change, right? I heard that on the radio one time. I said, yeah, that's true, right? Doesn't matter whether I like them or don't like them or whatever. I'm still getting up tomorrow and I'm doing my thing, right? They're not going to change that, right? They can't, right? So as much power as those guys wield, right? As much power as the people wield, wherever they may be, I still have to go about doing my thing. Now, the law is going to change, or things going to happen. Certainly, it could happen, right? But I just, to me, that was kind of interesting. And obviously, we know in Esther, the deal. A person got in power, right, who had bad intentions, right? Intentions to wipe out an entire people. Has that ever happened in history again? It certainly has, right? Can you give me some examples? Hitler, okay. Anybody else? Stalin, was waiting on that one. There you go, right? We could talk about some of the regimes and some of the Middle Eastern countries as well, right? Shoot, we had a whole war in Iraq because of Saddam Hussein, essentially, right? So, again, people in leadership roles, sometimes they're in bad roles. The guy in North Korea is threatening to blow up, places left and right all the time. That's a worry, right? Even though, he's not American, there's absolutely nothing we can control over that. If someone's got a nuclear bomb and he's waving it at you, that's something to be worried about. That's another Haman in the world, right? So it's concerning. All right, I think I got a couple more verses, right? So 1 Timothy 2, right? Someone take a peek at that, right? But again, even in our church, right? Going to look for a new youth group leader. That's what's currently happening here now. That is someone who will spend a lot of time with our kids. My kids in particular. Both of my kids are in the youth group. My daughter's going to be called up to the youth group this year. So, yeah, I have a big concern about that. I am praying over that left and right and backwards and forwards, right? That's someone who influences my child. I want my child to keep coming to church. I know it's my responsibility ultimately that I teach them the Bible, that I influence them, I teach them about Jesus, right? But if they're going, right now in youth group and on Wednesday nights in youth group and over summer and they're doing all the activities, that's someone who's going to influence them. The last person we had in that position, and I'm not pointing names or pointing fingers or anything, was not a good person at all. I did not want my children around that person, right? At all. Okay? Now, a couple people before that, great, wonderful. I was excited for my kids to go there, right? But then the person afterwards, I was like, oh man, this is not good, So again, that's something to be concerned about, right? That's something to worry about. So, who's got 1 Timothy? Sorry, is that yakking too much?
I have it.
Okay, thank you.
I urge you then, First of all, that petitions, prayers, intercession, and thanksgiving be made for all people, for kings and all those in authority, that we may live peaceful and quiet lives in all godliness and holiness.
So, like we talked about earlier, you're supposed to pray for your leaders. Like them, don't like them, so we can live in peace, but prayer for the decisions that they're going to make. Okay? All right, any other ideas or points about people in power through Esther?
I think sometimes we focus too much on the people in power.
Yeah.
The last part of that verse says that we may live peaceful and quiet lives. Our job as Christians aren't dictated by who's in control, by what's going on around us. Our job as Christians are to serve God, to share the gospel with others, and that doesn't change regardless. So,
Who's in office, that's right.
yes,
That's
you can
exactly
be
right.
concerned about those things, but it shouldn't affect you in such a way to where it allows you to worry more than what's outside your control. And sometimes, we get so concerned with things that we can't control that it stops us from doing our job as Christians, which it doesn't matter who's in control, it doesn't matter who our boss is, we still have a job to do as Christians.
Yeah, that is very well said. That is an excellent point. It doesn't matter who's out there. My job is still to love other people, right? To love God, to teach that to my children, right? To be the best Christian I can be. When does it become concerning? I guess was the idea I was throwing out there, and it's when people tell you can't be a Christian anymore. Or people tell you that you have to think a certain way, or you have to act a certain way. And being in public school, I see that, on a daily basis. I've been teaching for 24 years at this point. Back in 1999 when I first started, none of that stuff going on. Past 5 years, I've been to more meetings about this is how you're supposed to treat this situation, this is how you're supposed to deal with this situation, this is how you're supposed to think about this situation. And that's where I have the problem when leaders come in and tell me to act a certain way. I can still remember the first time I sat to a faculty meeting and people said, okay, now who has a Christmas tree up in your room, or who has something with a religious symbol up in your room or something like that? Just raise your hand and let me know, because we need to talk to you after the meeting. And so I spoke up. I just said, because I had a good relationship with the principal. I said, well, who's going to admit to that? Because we know the second we admit to that, we're going to get in trouble, right? And so, I just said that to lighten the mood a little bit, and so we all had to giggle about it. But they were like, well, this is just coming from the district, and this is what we're supposed to do. And I said, okay. I'm pretty sure it's still legal to have something up in your room if you want to have it up in your room, But again, I'm telling you, and that wasn't like 2 years ago. That was roughly 9 years ago. Okay? So, it's there, right? And again, I'm not trying to discount your statement. I'm just trying to say there are some people who get in there and have an agenda like Haman, and their agenda is not to be Christ-like, to be anti-Christ-like, and to go a completely opposite direction.
So, to that point, one of our good friends, his dad is, I believe, an engineer. He works for a company to where they started to celebrate Pride Day.
Yeah.
So he's told me that in order to get into the building where he works, you have to walk underneath a big prize. Like they put it at the front door. You have to walk underneath. And so he didn't make a big deal about it, but he found another way into the building and stuff like that. When they have those conversations and talks, he doesn't participate, or he shares his perspective on it. And so I agree. There are times to where it comes to your front door. It's in your face. You have to talk about it. Me and Jazz talk about it all the time to where, there are certain commercials that we watch on TV that you just have to tell the boys, hey,
yes,
go
we do that too, Brady and I do the same thing.
Because it's just like, until you're ready to talk about it, until you feel that they're ready to talk about it, which you will have to talk about it one day, you have to figure out ways to navigate through that. And sometimes leadership doesn't make that easy. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, like I said, as Christians, whether it's in a passive sense to where we're being peaceful and quiet with our lives, or whether it's out front to where it's hey, we need to talk about this because this isn't right. That goes with the territory regardless of who's in leadership.
Yeah.
So maybe that's a better way to say it.
No, like I said, I wouldn't discount your point at all. I thought it was a fantastic point. I'm with you 100% on that one. All right, and I totally agree. Like, just because somebody wants to have a Pride Day, I have students that want to be called by different names, because they identify a different way, and kind of like, okay, fine. I'm not going to sit there and argue with them about it and stuff like that. But the second, I did have a young lady who was, arguing with me about the spelling of her name, and I just said, well, you just told me what your name was, and I spelled it. you didn't tell me how to spell it. So don't get mad at me because you didn't tell me how to spell your name. It was with a C instead of a K. Okay, sorry. You know, my bad. That's not what was written down. And I didn't say it like that, but I said, okay, that's fine. You know, write it down, sweetheart, you're good. But I can't call her sweetheart because she doesn't. But again, in my head, that's what I'm thinking, right? You know, so it's hard, it's difficult, right? But I try and go about peacefully and, you know, keep things nice and be respectful of people at all times, okay? All right, so the next one, right, that I thought about was Esther's God's faithfulness, right? Which I think we see several times Mordecai mentions, right? Remember when Mordecai says, if you don't do this, what's still going to happen? Right? We're still going to, somebody else, God is some other way still going to save people. He's still going to be faithful to us, right? You know, but you've been put maybe in this position for such a time with this, right? So God is there, right, to help us out, you know, in all times, right? So Him being faithful, right? So Psalm 119, then Joshua 21:45.
Your faithfulness continues through all generations. You establish the earth, and it endures.
I think that's awesome. I mean, through all generations, it's God is never going to turn His back on you, right? He's always there, right? Which is amazing, right? And in Joshua, does anyone have that one?
Not one of all the Lord's good promises to Israel failed. Everyone was fulfilled.
I love that one. And we did Joshua, I know, a while back, but it's a reminder of every time God promises to do something, He will see it through, right? He will always, always, always be there, right? Now, I didn't put a ton for this one, for Ruth and Esther, right? And we're talking about God's providence. That is kind of the idea that God is always in control and God is always looking out, right, for how things are going to turn out in His way, His purposes, right? You know, we talked about Ruth, I think, a little bit with Boaz and the happenstance and what happens. We did that a while back. But does anyone see anything in Esther how God's providence works? I think we talked about that a little bit last time. How do things just happen to turn out so that the Jews will be saved instead of the bad guy winning, instead of Haman winning?
You had the right person in there to be queen.
Okay, so you had Esther in there. Okay, right? She's an orphan, adopted by Mordecai. Just happens to wind up being the choice of the king from, I don't know how many people, but lots of other choices, right? You know, and she just happens to be there at that time, right? And Mordecai, her uncle, to influence her. Could have been, you know, 1,000 other choices, right? But it happens to be Esther, okay? Right? Other ways that we see providence in Esther. Anyone have a late night recently? Stay up? Couldn't go to sleep? Oh, good. Y'all getting better sleep than I am then. That's good. So what happened with the king when he couldn't go to sleep? He just happened to, he picked the literal, like, worst thing to read. I mean, wow, I can't go to sleep. I'll just pick up this, you know, history book and I'll just flip through this. I don't do that if I can't go to sleep. Maybe I should. Maybe that would help me go to sleep. But when he picks it up, what does he notice? Well, Mordecai did, right? And that leads to Mordecai being honored. And this is kind of what starts the downfall of Haman, right? I mean, that's just what happens to happen at that time, right? You know, so again, God is there. God's working. Jack, I know you're ready to say something.
I'm not ready to say something.
Oh, come on, man. Yeah, you are.
Proverbs 21:1 really makes it clear, I think. It says, the king's heart is in the hands of the Lord. Like the river of water, He turns it whatever way He wishes. So, it's not coincidence that the king makes any choices. He's just, as God moves him.
Yeah.
You know, it's not even His control. I mean, that's what I...
No, I agree too. I mean, because 2 kind of goes along with that, right? A person may think their own ways are right, but the Lord weighs the heart. So I've always thought about Pharaoh, you know, whenever I think about that idea. Remember Pharaoh, you know, had his heart hardened by God, right? You know, so Pharaoh didn't want to do what God was intending. So eventually God said, okay, I'm going to make it so that you're going to keep rejecting me. You're going to keep doing the wrong thing so I can teach everyone a lesson through you. God's using you one way or the other, right? maybe not the way you want to be used, right? But we all are here according to His purposes, right? Which is a cool thing, right? A really cool thing. Does that make anyone? I think some people get disconcerted about that. That God has a plan for me and I can't do what I want to do all the time. I sometimes find that more comforting because I know God's in control and that I know He's got me and everything's going to be fine no matter what comes my way as part of His plan. So, I've always thought that's kind of a neat way to look at it. Right?
But also, it seems like there's a scripture somewhere, but doesn't it say, like, even if you're not going to fit, if you don't make the right decisions for God's plan that He had for you, God will find somebody else.
That
Isn't
sounds like it
there
should be a scripture
something-
somewhere. I don't know where it is. We need to
Girls
Google that
Upright.
sucker.
Janice.
That's right. All right, someone Google that one. We got to find out. That's a good one. But I think you're right. I mean, I think that's how God uses people. Yeah, I think you're exactly right.
Well, isn't that what Mordecai said? I mean,
Yeah, that's what.
Pretty
I-
much. Yeah, that's how I felt about it. Yeah, I mean, God, is going to find a way. If you don't do this right now, somebody else is going to step up and it's going to, save the Jews, right? Yeah, but you have been hopefully put in a position for a time like right now. Yeah,
Yeah,
excellent.
it says, "For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place."
Mhm. One way or the other, it's going to happen. And Mordecai, I think that is one of the coolest things about his character is he has that belief, right, that it's going to happen no matter what. Okay? All right, any other thoughts? I didn't want to get bogged down too much. I'm not trying to rush forward. Go ahead.
I got one more that
Yeah, same
I think
5:50 more.
kind of fits into this. We think so much about, he was sure lucky or playing, a guy throws the dice and he's lucky to come up with the right. I love this book of Proverbs. It's got so much stuff.
It's got some stuff in it. Yeah, it's good.
Proverbs 16:33.
16, okay.
The lot is cast into the lap. The lot would nowadays be like dice.
Yes.
Throwing the dice. The lot is cast into the lap, but its every decision is from the Lord. So what's that say about luck? There is no such thing. as
There's no
luck.
such thing. Well, remember, Purim, the word pure comes from lot. All right, that's what pure means, right? Haman is the one who cast the pure, he cast the lot. And he was casting it basically to figure out what day the Jews were going to be destroyed, right? But just like you're saying, right, when the lot was cast, when the pure was cast, right, Purim, it's all, okay, doesn't matter what you're doing, Haman, it's in God's hands, right? That day that you intended for destruction is going to become a day of reckoning for you, your family, and a day of celebration and joy for God's people, right? Which is, amazing and cool, all right?
Well, Jeremiah 29:11 tells us that God, I'll read it. It says, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. Then you will call on me and come and pray to me, and I will listen to you." God has a plan for each and every one of us,
Absolutely.
okay? The question is, do we choose it? And see, God gives us a choice to choose it or not, and it's the same choice was Esther's, to choose it or not.
That's
And
awesome.
she chose it.
And she chose it. That's right. That's an awesome point. That's a really good point. I just brought these up, just, thinking about it. I always love this poem. I think I talked about before. Y'all have seen this one before, right? About the guy after he's passed away, he's walking on the beach next to the Lord, and, he sees the footprints, remember?
Yeah.
And, I won't read the whole thing, but he basically says, the tough parts of my life, the saddest parts, I only saw one pair of footprints, and you said you were going to be with me the whole time. And God responds that was the time I carried you.
Yeah.
Right? That was the time we needed you. Which I love that. God is always with you.
Doesn't that give you a chill?
Yes. It is really cool. And how do we know God has our back? That's a picture of Job. It's a little hard to see with his sores and blisters and everything. And remember at the end, right, when Job is, kind of spoken to God and he, kind of figures it out, even after all these trials and tribulations, he tells him, "I know that you can do all things. No purpose of yours can be thwarted. You asked, who is this that obscures my plans without knowledge? Surely I spoke of things I did not understand, things too wonderful for me to know." And again, you know, I love the book of Job, but it's the idea we don't get everything that God has in store for us. All the suffering, everything that he did, everything that he went through, God still had him. It was still part of God's plan, right? Which is just, again, an amazing thing to me. I love that part. Okay, so on to another point, not to spend too much time. But I've always thought this one's cool. I mean, I thought about this one with Ruth, right? How ordinary people are using the Bible to accomplish extraordinary things, right? Amazing things happen, right? Okay. Are we good? Are we okay?
Henry had an accident last night and fell
Okay.
and slept on the floor,
Okay.
and Bob didn't call anybody, so Shelby found out, so Patty's gonna go check it out.
Okay, good. Do we want to stop and say a quick prayer for that?
We need to.
Okay, all right, let's do that, okay? All right, y'all pray with me. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for this day and all many blessings you've given to us. We want to reach out to you in prayer for Henry right now, who's had an accident. We wanted to get looked at, we wanted to get checked out by medical professionals. We know that everything is part of your plan. You have her in the palm of your hand. We hope for healing, for comfort. We hope that Bob can get help too, helping Henry. That she's able to get healing, good care, and that her friends are able to be there for her and lift her up and help her and comfort her in this time. We know that pain and suffering sometimes go hand in hand with this life, and we know sometimes that we have to go through it. We hope you reach out to them and help them through the recovery process, through the medical process, and watch over the medical team as they give Henry the best care. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right. So I was picking, you know, some kind of random people. Does anybody have anyone that you like in the Bible? Just an ordinary Joe who does something, or ordinary Jane, right? Who does something. I'm not going to leave the ladies out, trust me, right? Learn my lesson. All right, Brandy may smack me if I get home. But what do y'all think? Anyone that you like? Can't say Esther, that's cheating, right? We already took her off the board. Okay. Anybody else?
How about Lydia?
Okay.
I mean, she started a church, and she met with I wonder if there were any men in that group, but she met with people down by the river and shared God's good word with them, and Paul praised her,
Yes.
and yeah.
Yeah, there you go. All right. We got Lydia. I mean, there's literally tons of examples, right? I mean, I picked Peter and John. This is after they healed the guy, and Sanhedrin were kind of calling them up and trying to get them in trouble, and everyone looked upon them. When they saw the courage of Peter and John, they realized that they were unschooled, ordinary men. They were astonished, and they took note that these men had been with Jesus. Right? It's not a hero, king or queen, right? Ordinary person, right? That comes to an extraordinary moment, extraordinary position, right? And I think that's important to recognize. You know, I think a lot of times people feel, or at least, you know, I felt that way. Okay, I'm just, whatever. I'm just an ordinary guy, English teacher. I can't do much. There's nothing special that I'm going to do, right?
You know, we just did that study, and the whole book was called 12 Ordinary Men. The 12 apostles were all ordinary.
Yeah,
you know.
exactly. They're not, you know, fishermen, right? You know, just guys, right? You know, sorry, it's hard to read, but good old football coach Jimmy Johnson, right? The difference between ordinary and extraordinary is that little bit extra, right? It's that idea that you don't have to be special. You just have to be willing to do that little bit extra. You know, you're willing to go look at your friend when she needs help. You know, that's being extraordinary. You do that little bit more. It's within your realm, your possibility of control. You don't have to be the president, right? You don't have to be the CEO in your company. You know, sometimes it's the person just needs to hear something from Proverbs, and that's going to help them in their day. Sometimes a person just needs a word of encouragement, right?
That same author wrote a book, 14 Extraordinary Women.
Oh.
And I recommend it.
That's right. See, the women are extraordinary, but the men are just ordinary. I love it. That's great. That's good. All right, that's good. Who is that author, by the way? Because I wasn't in the class.
MacArthur.
Yeah.
Yeah, MacArthur.
Oh, MacArthur.
MacArthur.
Oh, MacArthur. All right, cool.
Forgot the first name.
I'm
but
going to have to.
that was
First
a
names don't matter
great
for
book.
those authors. All right, cool. I want to check that out, and that's good. That sounds like that's the next study that we need to be doing.
That's a good one.
All right, cool.
But Ben, you know, one thing is, as Christians, we should never shortchange God, what he can do for all of us. I mean, we all have certain abilities and talents,
Yeah.
but a lot of times we want to stay within that comfort zone that we are in. And God has a lot more things for us to do. One of my favorite scriptures is Exodus chapter 4, where Moses gives his excuses for not leading his people out of Egypt. And God, what's he do? He gives him a helper to do it. And Moses, he gets out of his comfort zone and is able to lead the people out of Egypt.
Yeah, and I mean, I was waiting for someone to say Moses or David or whoever, because I think in lots of ways we think of him as like Moses, right? But he started off as ordinary Joe in my mind, right? You know, God had extraordinary plans for him, right? But he was just an ordinary guy. I mean, I guess you could say he was rescued, was a prince of Egypt and all that kind of stuff. So maybe not, right? But still, yeah.
You know, you think about ordinary people, to me, Ananias comes to mind.
Mm.
Somebody, the angel or the Lord or somebody said, listen, I want you to go to a street and meet this guy that's been capturing Christians and killing them, and tell him what he's got to do to be saved. Now, that would take some courage.
Yes.
That would take some faith.
Yes.
That would take a lot on his part.
And I think God knows the people to talk to, right? That he's prepared you. He's put that in you, that you're going to have that courage. You're going to have that faith to do that extraordinary thing. Cool. Okay. All right. So moving on, a couple more mentors in our life, right? I think people, or God puts people in our life that can teach us wisdom, right? We all need people, hopefully, right? You know, people that are going to help us, people that are going to instruct us. Obviously, Mordecai is the one in our book here. How does Mordecai help instruct Ruth? How is he her mentor? I think that's pretty easy.
Yeah, it's like a parent to her, I
Yeah.
feel like. He
When
tells
she
her what
doesn't
to
have
do.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Is it hard to be parent sometimes with your kids?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's never hard.
It's never hard. It's easy, piece of cake, right? Remember in the hero's journey story that David mentioned, right? Mentors are a part of that cyclical thing, right, that we see here. Obviously, I did my nerdy pictures, right, of the mentors that I liked, right? But I mean, you know, can you think of mentors that you've had in your life that helped you figure things out, right? I mean, you know, we are told, you know, the older men, the older women are supposed to teach, right? The younger generation, right? And we need people to look out for us. And I talk to people in church when I don't know something, right? Or want to know something, or I have a question. And then sometimes it's just, you know, a little response, or even if they don't know, but I get to talk to them, like, fine, they don't know either, so that makes me feel even better, right? Maybe we can figure it out together, right? You know, so I mean, it's a good thing to have that person you can rely on. You never want to know that you, or think that you have it all figured out, right? You want to rely on other people to help you, okay? All right.
That's why Deuteronomy 6 is so important for parents to remember, where it tells us that impress on your children today about how much you love the Lord, how much you want to follow the Lord, and your children see that in you, and as that example. You say, because you can say all you want to say to a kid, if they don't see you doing it, it's not happening.
It's not going to happen.
So it has to start with the, you know, in the family, in the parents, and then it goes on, and God gives us many other ways, many other blessings how we can be successful in raising our kids.
Yeah,
To love the Lord.
I was going to bring that up in a couple more points. We can skip to it now, but you know, how generations are impacted to come from the decisions that we make and the influences that we give them, right? You know, whether you know it or not, you praying for a kid up on that board and showing them, you know, hey man, I'm praying for you, or, you know, I'm looking out for you. That makes a difference in a kid's life, right? You know, you mentoring someone, you taking a young couple under your wing, or talking to them, or, you know, helping out with a Sunday school class on Wednesday night, or whatever it is, that makes a difference in someone's life, right? A big difference, whether you know it or not, and you think about it or not. You know, I told the story of Bill, you know, just calling my house, even after he'd been kind of hurt during the pandemic, you know, hey, checking up on you guys, haven't seen you in church in a while. And I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. The answering machine caught Bill, right? I didn't get to talk to Bill, right? But just hearing it on the answering machine is a big deal, knowing that someone's reaching out and they care about you, right? You know, so I've always thought that's really cool. Titus was just the part I was talking about, how the older generation sees the younger generation. So I'm just trying to make sure we finish today. Didn't want to get caught. We talked about this a little bit. I think Miss Lottie brought this up for sure, all right, that we need to put others before ourselves, right? Esther risked her life for her people, right? You know, very, very important part. Can you think of any other examples in the Bible where people are putting themselves before other people? Sorry, I took that off the board. Jesus is always the answer, right? So I knew everyone's going with that one, so I was trying to make it a little bit harder. Okay.
Naomi.
Okay, there we go. Okay, see, easy. All right, good job. All right, other examples? Rahab. Excellent, very good. See, it's only the ladies, I guess. Right. And women are very good about thinking about others, by the way. Right? Women have that emotional intelligence, I think, where they think about other people. Sometimes guys do get a little self-centered. Right? Was David thinking about others when he was fighting Goliath? I think so. Yes, I think so. He was. We can argue about that. Maybe not, because he did say, "Well, what do I get out of it?" Right? So, but he did, you know, meet the challenge for someone who's insulting his people and stuff like that, right? He did end the kind of war, right? So, yeah, I think he did it too. I mean, I think there are plenty of examples, lots of examples we can go through. Let's look at Philippians 2, right, 3 through 4. Really quickly. Sorry, this is a good one. I didn't want to skip out on this one. So Philippians 2, do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit, rather in humility, value others above yourself, not looking to your own interest, but each of you to the interest of others. Right? So again, Paul telling us, you know, hey, you know, it's about other people, not about ourselves. Right?
I saw a quote that was annoyingly convicting a few years ago. Was that
annoyingly convicting?
Yes.
That's a good one.
Self-preserve and give freely, and I think about that every time. I'm like, I would rather not do that, but I'm not giving freely. I'm self-preserving if I don't do this thing that I feel like I probably should do. So
probably should do. Right? That is annoyingly convincing, isn't it? Yeah, that's a great way to say that. Yeah, right. It's not always sometimes in our best interest, but it's something that we do need to take care of sometimes. That's an excellent point. All right, and so last but not least, and this is what Bill was saying, bringing up, how our choices that we make will influence our families and future generations. I just want to make sure we get to this today. I know that we're at the end of class, right? We can look at them all throughout the Bible, right? All throughout the Bible, right? Adam and Eve, big choice right there, right? You know, in Exodus 43, just to quickly sum up, you know, law comes down from Moses, and remember it's in there, I will visit the inequities upon your son in future generations, right, for generations to come. God reminds us of that, right? Not just in Exodus, right, but in other books of the Old Testament as well, right? Choices that a father will make will still come back to visit the son, right? It just is going to be there. Look at the example of David and Solomon, right? Okay, choices David makes, right, influence his family for years to come. Right? Lots of choices, plenty of dysfunction, right? As big of a hero as he was, right, still lots of problems, okay, right? Joshua, right, you know, the big verse from Joshua, as for me and my family, me and my house, we will serve the Lord, right? You know, I mean, that's the choice we're obviously looking for making. And the choice that Esther makes, right, for generations to come to save her people moving forward, going forward, right? You know, stories during the Holocaust of people, Hitler literally trying to wipe out a people, saving the Jewish people, right? So again, really, really cool things. All right, sorry if I went a little bit over today. All right, that is it. That is all. Next week, all right, David and I are going to try and tag team it, and we're going to do both Ruth and Esther, and maybe play some games. So bring your cell phone to class, and we'll see if we can play some trivia games and have a little bit of fun, okay? All right, y'all take care, and I'll see you next week.